Well, thanks for joining me, Graham. I'm really excited to have you on the show today. So, just a little bit of background. We first started talking because you took me up on the uncomplication sessions, and it was really interesting because I think that you've had a very similar experience, both in what you have been learning about crypto, sharing about crypto, and then also just as a creative. So, it's fun to talk to you about not only the crypto market and some of your insights there and some of the teaching that you're doing in the space, but also I've really enjoyed talking to you about some of the challenges that people like you and I face trying to bring maybe a different message to an audience. And so yeah, I at this point I consider you more of a friend than anything, and I think that our
Same
conversations
here.
have been really just natural and fun. So, yeah, I guess just to kind of give the audience, a little preview. What's the headline on why you're here today? What's the big thing that you're really passionate about sharing?
Yeah, absolutely. So the big thing that basically I wanted to share is basically the clarity in crypto guide. So I originally wrote this as a written guide last year, and now I met an amazing animator who's now a good friend of mine, and so we're now animated on YouTube as well. But basically, clarity in crypto is designed to be the most accessible place on the internet for a new person to come and actually learn the big picture of what's going on in crypto. Because it's to really understand. I mean, you and I have talked about this a lot, but to really understand crypto and why crypto is not just important but important today, you need to understand a lot more than just the crypto space. You do need to understand um, blockchains, crypto, immutability. You need to understand Web3, the history of crypto. If you ever want to understand where things are going, you have to understand where we've been. But you also need to understand where the world economy is today. You need to understand the history of money, what fiat currency is, the position that central banks are in, centralization of power in tech companies, how market manipulation works. And then there's a whole nother set of things on top of that. If you want to actually invest in a space that is changing so fast, how do you identify the things that are not changing and how do you invest in those? So it's a lot of stuff for a new person. And I didn't know, um, it kind of started last year where I was having so many conversations, just sometimes, every other day, 1 to 3 hours with a lot of different people, a lot of very smart people, asking a lot of the same questions. And I realized there was not a single place on the internet. I could send them to a lot of different places for, you understand DeFi, there's Finomatics, Real Vision's great, there's, Coin Bureau. But in terms of the big picture of here's what's going on and here's why it matters, there wasn't anywhere on the internet that I knew to send people. So I made one. And yeah, and that's really the essence of clarity.
Yeah. And I could say when we first started talking and you sent me some of the videos that you were animating, and it was very close to home because it was a lot of the same content and perspectives that I was really interested in. And I think that you have done a really nice job of concisely packaging those.
Thank you.
And I think that we can probably agree that this is an interesting space for people to be entering crypto, but more than likely there will be another period of frenzy and people just
Hmm.
hearing about it, downloading an app, and coming in and making a lot of the same mistakes that are common to newbies. So I appreciated that where I've been just kind of on YouTube, kind of creating this flow of consciousness. It was really nice to see a lot of those ideas really well animated. So yeah, and I think you do cover a lot. What do you think is the very first thing that someone who gets off the boat on Crypto Island needs to know?
Absolutely. So the guide was originally in kind of, I guess, depending on how you look at it, 3 to 4 parts. But I mean, for somebody getting started, and I can kind of go through specifics here, but I mean, it's eh, basically just on the Clarity in Crypto YouTube page. You can just go to playlist section one and hit play, and it'll basically take you through the full piece. But I think understanding the basics of the crypto space, and that's kind of the way that I have the sections broken down. Section one is basically understanding crypto in and of itself. So understanding how blockchains work, understanding immutability, decentralization, and sort of why this is valuable in the first place. Then understanding the history of crypto, because again, for someone coming in, it's trying to understand where crypto is today. If just a new person coming in, those of us who've been in crypto for years, I mean, you feel the same way. It's almost impossible how fast everything's moving. So if you just come in and try to jump in terms of everything that's happening right now, it's just a recipe to be confused and get taken advantage of and lose all your money really fast. Uh, Versus if you look at, okay, there are three major waves of technology that have happened over the past decade in crypto. And we have Bitcoin, we have Ethereum, we have these third generation platforms. And what direction is this technology moving and why is it moving that way? um, then all of a sudden things start to become a lot more clear. And then all of a sudden you start to see, okay, here are the pieces that are not moving. And for me, the most fundamental pieces are obviously the layer ones. And then basically, and so that's kind of the 101 crypto stuff. Like, okay, this space is starting to make more sense. But then again, and I think this is also really important. I think for younger people, that's probably enough for them to, okay, I get this. This is where things are moving. This is cool. But I also have a lot of conversations with, I spent my career in the tech world in Silicon Valley, but I grew up in the middle of nowhere in Texas, right? So I grew up around a lot of, and I have a lot of older friends and adult friends and even 80s and 90s that are still very avid investors and are interested in crypto. And for that, I think it's much more important, say like into Section 2 and things like that, where it's okay, where is the world economy today, and why does this matter? Because without 2008 and without 2020, crypto would not be nearly as interesting as it is today. And 2008 is the reason why Bitcoin exists, and that really was kind of the and we can obviously talk through things in more detail, but obviously the kind of tipping point in terms of um, more of the breaking of the fiat currency system or the beginning of it. But then 2020 was just and we're all feeling the pain from central banker actions um, after the initial COVID crash. But that to me was the um, solidifying that this wasn't that crypto and Web3 wasn't just happening at some point in the next decade. This was happening now, and there was no longer a going back. And obviously, I'm far from the only person to have seen that. There's a reason why institutions, governments, and everyone else are taking this so seriously now. That was the tipping point. But anyway, but I think everybody kind of has. I think the comparisons to the internet are by far the strongest in terms of both the impact that crypto is having and will have, but also in terms of what gets an individual person there. Like, there's not one single uh, thing that you could say to everybody for it to click. It's like, what do you like about the internet? Like, everybody has a different answer. It's what do you see as valuable about it? It's a different answer. It's a communication network where you can pass information. That information is different to everybody. Crypto and Web3 being, okay, this is a way to create and control decentralized networks, how to decentralize power. Well, that's one of like the broadest things, in the world. It could be money, it could be a social network, it could be DeFi, it could be financial infrastructure, it could be identity, it could be property, it could be any number of things. And so I think that for people to have a safe and honest place, that is not trying to shill you, not trying to get you to buy something, but a safe and honest place of, okay, we're going to walk through the basics, and we're going to walk through why all of this matters, and at whatever point this clicks for you is fine. But anyway, so kind of long answer,
Yeah,
but
no,
I
no,
yeah.
yeah, that's a great opening. Because the question, I'll just go right to it. So you said one and two, and I presume there's a three. And
Mhm,
what's interesting is that you stated the why, which is pretty profound, and it's why I was attracted to crypto as strongly as I was, and that desire for there to be decentralization and equality, equal opportunities, and just the
mhm,
creative potential of these technologies to solve problems. That's the why, and it's also coupled with the failure of the old system.
yep.
The what is a little more granular, and it's more the different projects, how they, like you said, the layer ones versus some of the different
Mhm,
products that people might see that involve crypto, like what does it all mean?
mhm,
But then there's also the how. And I think that's where the real pitfalls are, because you can buy into the why, and
mhm.
what doesn't take too long to get up and running. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
lot easier today than it ever has been
Oh yeah.
to move fiat money into any number of ecosystems, and now you're playing. but that the how, I think, is where a lot of people struggle, and
Hmm.
there is a lot of predation. And while there is this underlaying kind of virtuous uh, infrastructure being built, to some extent, it is being put in the service of the same old human
Yeah.
games of, the
Hmm.
people with 90% are doing all this energy or
Hmm.
taking all this time just to take the last 10%. And I would be curious to hear how you address that in your clarity series,
Hmm.
because that was one of our earlier conversations, was just recognizing, yeah, you might get off the boat and be all excited to buy in, but you've got people right and left that are trying to separate you from your money, your crypto, and they don't care what happens to you on the other end of that. They're just, using that hopium to
Yeah.
empty your pockets.
I know, and I'm just kind of I guess just kind of like the older I get, the more that I'm just kind of continually like um, confronted by that fact that the majority of the people who control the existing system, that is literally all they care about is money and more money. And it's just like it's kind of depressing sometimes, where it's literally like that is the supreme value above everything. So anyway, but kind of to answer your question, so that's kind of a good segue into like the third section, which is like, okay, I understand the basics of crypto and why this matters. Two, I understand kind of the world economy and the infrastructure around, okay, why this matters now. And then three, okay, how do I actually take action on that?
Mm.
How do we navigate through the kind of jungle that is the financial system? And so that's basically section three, which is an analysis, at least from the perspective that I've been an investor for 20 years now, since I was a kid, and basically the many painful, hard-earned lessons that I've learned investing in early technology for a really long time is okay. How do you put yourself in a good position? And to me, like I said, that focuses on. I'm not a trader. I don't advocate anybody trades. I think that if someone is going to, or I say anybody, someone who's knowledgeable and is an expert or wants to actually do that as a profession or as something like that, then again, go for it. And I think that if someone does that, probably following the Wyckoff method is probably the most intelligent way to do that, because you're watching behaviors that just recur over and over and over again. But for the majority of people trying to do any kind of trading, you're going to get screwed. Like you don't nobody knows what's going to happen. You're going to time something wrong. There's billions of dollars that goes into trying to separate you from your money. The two market manipulation videos, and your input was super appreciated on those before they were released. And basically into how market makers work. And I think even just people understanding what a market maker is and how market makers work. I remember the first time that I learned that, and I was probably like 18 or 20, and learned it from a market maker who used to work at the brokerage that I used, and I was just floored by like, how is this even legal? Like, like screw you guys. This is insane that this is how our system works. And so anyway, and so people just kind of acknowledging, um, if you try to trade, you're jumping in the water with a bunch of sharks. You're probably going to get your leg bitten off. The way to win the way to consistently win, the way that the majority of people, whether they're very sophisticated or fairly unsophisticated as an investor, is your the Buffett strategy. You're long term focused, and you own good businesses. And in the crypto world, instead of good businesses, you can place that with good networks, quality networks that are built on fundamental technology that is going to enable real value to be brought into the world, and then that have actual users and network adoption, and are actually delivering on those things. And it's not necessarily one or the other. It's an overlap of a lot of different things. And so section three is around, okay, how to identify those. And at least, from my perspective, the philosophy that I've, been using for years, um, of how to, and there's, I'm not the biggest Bezos fan, but he has a great quote that's basically, he used with when they were building Amazon in the early years, which is basically, when you're in a space that's changing really fast, focus on the things that aren't changing.
Hmm.
And so that's pretty much the ethos of the whole investing philosophy that I've used for years, even before crypto. Of focus on the platforms, focus on the networks, um, and focus on the things that are going to be built on top of. So that's it's, and I think for somebody coming in, just like having that framework of, okay, I understand the three waves of crypto. I understand these Ethereum and third generation platforms. Then I understand things that are being built on top of that. Well, that's a huge differentiator right there of like, am I building something that's a network that once people start building on it, it's going to be really sticky and it's going to be really hard for people to change. Ethereum is more expensive and slower and more painful to like build and operate on than pretty much any other third generation platform, and yet it's still dominant because that network effect is really strong. Versus trying to invest in, say, and there's a number of other third generation platforms that I think are super compelling as well. Versus like say, oh, I'm going to chase the latest DeFi project or the latest this that's gonna it's going to be
Hmm.
forked, it's going to be copied, and you're going to have 10 different versions of it, even if it's really successful. Like, Uniswap is super successful. You have Pancake Swap, you have Spooky Swap, you have a million other copies of it that are going to instantly spring up. And maybe the capital keeps Uniswap alive, but you're eaten away at from all
Hmm.
sides. And that's something where, unless you're someone who's really in the crypto space and is actually going to be playing those short-term things, you probably shouldn't own stuff like that. Versus if and so most people trying to do stuff like that, these really sophisticated strategies, you're just exit liquidity for somebody who's more, who has more knowledge. Versus again, the people who said, I'm not going to try to chase these little things or whatever. I'm just going to invest in big ecosystems like Apple, like
Hmm.
Amazon. It's the same playbook, right? It's just you know decentralized versions of AWS and things like that, right? Um, that to me is the easiest way to win, and where the crypto space will complain about a 10x on something because they like to gamble
Hmm.
and like to, oh, it's not a 50x. A 10x on a meaningful sum of money can change your life, like truly can, and it can be extremely impactful to me, or to people, and has been to me as well. And so anyway, just helping people to identify, hey, there are
Hmm.
relatively safe, crypto speaking. There's always an element of a lot more risk in crypto in general, but if you can handle the volatility, there are relatively safe ways to get exposure to the space. If you look at a number of different factors. I think that was the most recent, the most recent video actually was basically like 10 things to look for when you're evaluating a crypto project. It's not rocket science. It's not all that hard. It just
Hmm.
takes a lot of knowledge that you know either you're going to pay either you're going to pay to learn on
Hmm.
your own, or somebody's going to
Yeah.
teach you.
So I'm curious, your thoughts on the following. So what I observed in the last big market cycle is that um, Bitcoin, which is
Hmm.
this, very, there's a lot more money in it proportionally than any other crypto. So it moves slower. However, it has more lasting power. There's more at this point, financial institutions and others that are in that, which actually mute some of that volatility.
Hmm.
That is really easy to understand or to communicate to someone, maybe even in a period like this where all prices are down, all of the altcoins, the non Bitcoin, and even Ethereum is still considered an altcoin by many, but
Hmm.
those are all really depressed. Bitcoin is this big, very clear, like, oh, if you're investing in crypto, it means Bitcoin. What happens is, or at least what has happened now multiple times, is as these market cycles happen, and I do believe that with Bitcoin, these cycles are driven not just around, oh, this big future that we're trying to get to, but oh, we fell short this time. Like, oh, we're going to move from fiat to Bitcoin, but oh, we fell short. It's more that there's a large holding of Bitcoin over a long period of time, and then these big surges are profit taking events.
Yeah.
And so really, my comment is twofold. One is that what the what the smart money are doing, what the savvy investors are doing, are understanding these cycles, and they are timing, maybe not the tops and the bottoms, but at least the sentiment change.
Hmm.
But what that also does is when Bitcoin is on this rocket to the moon, brings everybody in these consumer apps, and now Coinbase and Robinhood and all of these different platforms, crypto.com, they're just showing uneducated crypto
Yeah.
investors like this thing just moved by 200%. This thing just moved by
Yeah.
2000%. Dogecoin is up. Everyone hears the story about the brother-in-law that, made
Yeah.
$5 million by taking his Denny's paycheck and putting it in. So now all of a sudden, this like, okay, I understand Bitcoin, this is stable, whatever. People bail out of that and move whatever investment they might have had in Bitcoin into these other projects. That's why these altcoin cycles, once Bitcoin kind of stalls out, the
Yeah.
money is rotating. It's not all new money in. A lot of it is going project to project to project. And in a way, like sheep on a green field, like you're either there early and you get the grass, or you're there late and you get slaughtered. And I'm doing this as a very poor question. It's just kind of revealing my own,
I agree with you on everything you said,
yeah.
though. I mean,
So
I like.
yeah, so I guess to put it back in the form of a question, how does one understand this information about the safe play, the Jimmy Buffett method, and make meaningful gains there without getting distracted or outright suckered by the noise of the crypto space? All of these celebrities, all of these people that are saying, "Oh, this is the next big, thing that's going to blow," and it's just three letters. You've never heard of it. You know nothing about the
Yeah.
underlying technology team, whatever. But this is my prediction for the next 10x, 100x. How do you consult with, yeah, the people that you're talking to and in the information that you're providing? How do you stay focused on the 10x and not lose everything chasing the 1000x?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and kind of the avoiding shiny objects thing. I think is like surprisingly difficult for a lot of people. I think, myself included during a bull market. Like I'll chase things that are further out the risk curve too. I won't go the meme coin route, but I'll definitely like it has to have an economic justification for it. But like I'll definitely go further out the curve too. So I don't know. I guess big question, very good question. So um, I think kind of starting with your comment on the cycles and then kind of going into that. So one of the videos, I think it's on portfolio allocation, or I think it's the portfolio allocation one. Anyway, I cover a little bit on like the concept of a risk curve of exactly what you're talking about. All right, Bitcoin's the safest, then we have Ethereum, and then we have third generation project, and we have kind of further out until you get into the shitcoin 1000x,
Mhm.
things right there, which are just they're scams. They're lottery tickets, right? And it's either a scam that where you get out before it collapses, or it doesn't. Like so it's like the Wolf of Wall Street penny stock type stuff, right? So just also for I guess kind of my own just moral reasons, I've always kind of viewed, even since I was a kid, that the decisions and how you approach anything is kind of how you approach everything. And however, it's like however you date, however you treat people, like that's not a
Mhm.
representation of them, it's a representation of you. And I think it's the same thing with how people invest. And like not saying this in like a judgmental way, because we always, we've all kind of gone through different, maybe more gambling-ish type phases. But like if somebody is out just chasing all this nonsense stuff, there's probably something going on kind of emotionally, that like,
Mhm.
hey, maybe we need to kind of bring this back, maybe we need to kind of be with. And the nice thing about investing is that like it will teach you that you'll lose your money, and then you will have to face the fact that what I did didn't work.
Mhm.
Am I going to face that, and am I going to change that? And so to me, it kind of comes down to, I've always kind of viewed, my, you know, investing in general as kind of almost kind of like a moral exercise in a certain way, because it's a forcing function that makes you decide where you really see value, and what you have no matter how rich or poor you are, you have a finite amount of money, you have a finite amount of um, basically moves that you can make. And so I've always very much enjoyed kind of that aspect of it. So I would first kind of put that lens on it if someone finds themselves being distracted by the 1000x to this, because it is tempting sometimes, especially if someone is in a difficult place and really needs that money. But I would first kind of look at the psychological pattern that is looking at that, because again, it's the same kind of psychological loop that makes people want to go buy lottery tickets. And it's basically allowing someone else to prey on you, which is there's the entire financial space is is pretty much set up to just try and prey on people. And it's really, and we've all, fallen into a million different things. But once you see it and you're like, oh, my expected value chasing this little
Mm.
nonsense thing is negative, I should probably not do this. And sort of bringing it back to where are the things that are actually going to drive real value. If we're kind of using a comparison of, the early internet, the dot com bubble was, a perfect example. Crypto just has a dot com bubble every 4 years, right? So
Mm.
like, you had the pets.com and you had all these little dot com stocks that were like, the fundamentals are dead. It doesn't matter if a company makes money, blah blah blah, hype and
Mhm.
nonsense. Same kind of thing as, meme coin stuff and everything. And then you also had Apple and you had Amazon and you had people that, if you truly looked at it, if you took the hype away and you looked at, not just like what was being built, but you also looked at kind of the character of the founders
Mm.
and whether or not the founders necessarily. I think we have a lot of actually incredibly, like, morally incredibly incredible people in crypto. Fortunately, more so than, say, necessarily a lot of internet companies. Um, but basically, like, look at the level of commitment of this founder,
Mm.
and it's, I think whether you're looking at, like, Vitalik or Charles Hoskinson or Gavin Wood or whatever it is, these are not people that are just out here trying to build a new project to shill, right? This is not like, oh, we're just trying to, build some little meme coin to get something to go viral. This is these people's life's work. Like, this is what they believe in more than anything. This is what they've dedicated their lives to doing. And it's those are the kind of people who create things that change our world. Those are the Steve Jobs, the Bill Gates, the Elons, like, those are the people to look for, those are the people to follow, and those are the people to bet on. And so I think that's another kind of, again, kind of, talking about the, well, we're going for the 10x instead of the 100x.
Mm.
It could be 100x. It's just a longer time frame because you're building something real rather than chasing a little gambling thing. And I think, kind of also to that, it's also taking into account, like, your mental state. And I also, like, I'm a big believer in, um, I would say, like, a more holistic approach to, and this is one of the big reasons why I've been such a big fan of yours for a really long time, of, like, the ultimate pursuit is not money.
Mm.
Like, money is an idea that we came up with as humans, and it's a very, very useful idea, and it lets us interact with each other without using violence. It lets us allocate resources.
Mhm.
It's a really, really useful idea. But the end state is not to be obsessed with money, because you're just going to, like, stress yourself into a hole. You're never going to
Mhm.
have enough. You're more likely to, ironically, make decisions that make you lose all your money. Like, you know you see that happen every cycle. Three Arrows Capital, like, perfect example. Brilliant, brilliant guys.
Mhm.
Been in crypto for a really long time, made ungodly amounts of money, but it wasn't enough, and they keep pushing, and now they're, like, wanted by the law, and it ruined everybody.
Mm.
And so, also, with the long term approach, you don't have to worry about, oh, what did the market do today? What Sometimes I'll just not look at the news for, like, weeks at a time, and then come back of just like, okay, I missed this, because the big picture is the same,
Mm.
and the things that I'm invested in are the same. And it's my investment thesis in crypto has been the same thing for, like, 6 years, of, basically, that the layer ones were uh, the safest, the most stable thing, and the only thing that was clear enough to have a 5 year time horizon on.
Mm.
Um, and so, anyway, again, another kind of long answer, because I think there's a lot of, like, really good questions kind of bundled into
Yeah,
that.
all in one.
But yeah, but it kind of all comes back to that, taking a step back, looking at the thing clearly, and saying, okay, what is likely to still be around in 5 years, right?
Yeah. So a couple of thoughts there, because I've talked to, as you can imagine, quite a few people that have reached out, or I've contacted, or have contacted me in various ways, and I've seen this more times than I can count, where someone says, "I had everything, I lost
Yeah.
everything. I'm 300,000, $800,000 in the hole. Help me get it back. Like,
Yeah.
what can I do to get this back? Like, I lost everything on leverage, or I did this silly thing,
Yeah.
but I know next time I'm going to do it, you know, different." And so it's been really striking to me that whatever it's doing to our nervous system, this 24/7 casino,
Yeah.
it's a lot harder to escape than knowledge would have you believe. Because I think anyone could be
Yeah.
sat down, they could be shown like the
Yeah.
moving parts and say, okay, I understand mechanically how this works. But the emotion that one feels when they've been up,
Yeah.
in a number, a certain
Hmm.
amount, and then things turned on them, and they like, they made some bad moves, or they, chased something else, and now all of a sudden, they're in a loss. Like logic flies out the window,
Yeah.
rationality flies out the window, and you have kind of an entire ecosystem of people that are on tilt doing exactly the thing that got them wrecked in the first place. And I don't know that there's necessarily a solution to that. It doesn't seem to be education. When I started making videos and really getting into this, for me it's like, as you said, what's the deeper reason here? Like, you're
Yeah.
chasing money, why? And when someone says, I just want to make money, I want the Lamborghini, I want the lifestyle, I've seen other people do it, like that's what I want. um, you know, Moralistically, or even just, yeah, how people approach life, you can definitely learn a lot about someone by,
Yeah.
two different investors. This one has a kid who requires a high degree of care and is just trying to set them up to be, safe and secure when that parent is gone. This person over here is just like, I want money. I'm going to get money. This is a way to make
Yeah.
money. And I don't know that you can that we can truly influence either of those people. Like, in a way, the market is doing exactly what it is and has done, purely because humans are humans, and the nervous system response to these like intermittent rewards and the dopamine and everything that happens when you're in the crypto casino. um, I don't know, I just put that on the table because I was really optimistic, like, oh, we can change this, we can learn about it, we can have an elevated dialogue. And I think that has happened, but it's the people that were already predisposed to make
Yeah.
good decisions are now making better decisions. But that person who says, all right, Bitcoin, 10x, maybe 8x next time, maybe 5x, diminishing returns, like, am I going to just put a portion of my paycheck into that every month and walk away, or am I going to go for my shot? you know and
Yeah.
It's actually a relief, I guess, that allows the kind of more patient investors, I think, to see returns, because they're able to just like ride that cycle where the other people are getting eaten by the sharks. So anyway, that wasn't even a question. That was just sort of a little rant based on the fact that a
I
lot of
again agree
people.
with you. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah,
I,
it's
I I sat down with people and said, "Here's how it works. Here's why you won't get your money back by doing the thing that just lost you your
yeah.
money." And at the end, they're like, "I'm still going for it." It's like, all right.
Yeah.
The other question I had, actual question, is, were you surprised by Luna?
Um, not really. I
Yeah.
mean, it was so I was surprised by other things. I was Celsius surprised me, but Luna didn't. And
Sure.
I,
Let's talk about the whole, like, all those
yeah,
strings together. Then, Celsius, Luna, Three Arrows.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, and I wrote a couple newsletters about this when it happened as well. Luna, I'd had so many conversations with friends about Luna, because a few folks I knew were super into the kind of that whole stablecoin wave and everything, and it was basically like, hey, nobody has made uh, an uncollateralized stable that has worked. They are like, they blow up. This is like what they do. This is a fancy uncollateralized stable. Um, it's what I thought was probably going to happen was that it was going to get stretched out for longer. I thought it was going
Mm,
to blow. It was because it kind of felt like I had this conversation with my best friend around the time. Like, um, we're basically like looking at Luna when everybody was talking about how brilliant Luna was and changing everything, and we're like, I'm like, yeah, I'm wondering if I'm crazy because it just looks like a time bomb to me, you know. And I just thought that the VCs were going to do more to bail it out,
mm,
or do more to keep it propped up. But once the market kind of, once the faith goes away in a stable coin,
mm.
it's like faith goes away in a money or whatever, and you realize there's nothing actually
There's
there, right?
nothing there.
And so no, that one wasn't too surprising. And then kind of the fallout from that with Three Arrows. I mean, it's always kind of surprising to see the level of exposure that people have, but it was, but having a few. hedge funds blow up because of Luna, not super surprising. The thing that really did surprise me was Celsius. Um, and that one, yeah, that one
Yeah,
stung.
and I bring it up because I
Yeah,
want to just like gauge your barometer on, you know, it's one thing to look at, okay, top 10 cryptos are safer than
no,
things
they're
further
not.
down the list. Like
No,
there's a lot of just sort of like,
no way.
blind faith in
Yeah,
because this thing is seemingly well loved, well adopted, founders on Twitter, you know, and then all of a
yeah,
sudden the bottom falls out and you're left. So I guess, where else do you see the like the solidarity of projects other than Bitcoin and Ethereum?
yeah,
How do you take this Celsius lesson and actually like maybe even add a few more layers of due
yeah.
diligence to your
I mean the Celsius thing. So I mean I'm a big I have none of my funds with custodians for the most part. I caution about the whole point of crypto is to be able to custody things yourself
Mm,
and to not have these centralized powers. The thing that surprised me, because I custody the vast majority of my funds, but I had a little bit in Celsius because it was basically, I remember having this conversation with a friend of mine who used to be a director at the Fed, and we talk about fun stuff like this all the time. And we talked about this literally like 2 weeks before Celsius. We were just talking about their deteriorating decision making of
yeah.
just like this series of bad decisions. And I just remember us talking about this, like, well, they could blow up. And I remember, I think I explicitly said something like, basically, I feel like we would see it in the smaller ones first. Like they're
Mm,
so well capitalized, they have so much liquidity that the biggest pension fund in Canada just took this. Like, there's no way that they are as exposed as some of these smaller players. And I think it's kind of that Lehman Brothers lesson of when it's in a black box, don't trust it. Like, nobody
mm,
is too big to fail. And the whole point of crypto is to be able to have transparency and to not have these custodial situations. So um, for me, it's just kind of relearning a lesson that I'd softened on a little bit of, oh, custodians have matured a lot. Okay, maybe we'll
mm,
have a little or something like that. Like, um, and so that's probably, I always get one or two, things that sting out of each cycle. And that's the biggest one. Um, yeah, that's the biggest one here, or this cycle by far.
mm. Um, yeah, I thought that was pretty wild too because I had a lot of people that I just knew and respected in terms of their experience and vetting projects well. And I know a lot of people that lost money in the Luna ecosystem. And again, it's like that shiny object syndrome. I even had moments where I was just like, shit, if I had just like bet on Luna, like that would have been the one kind of like pony to bet on this cycle, at different times. But it also just shows that at the bottom of these things, really, when the music stops, it can just
Yeah,
turn to nothing. Because at the end of the day, the value of anything is only what you can have someone else pay you for it. And with that, I would love to know, Bitcoin, crypto, like it borderlines on religion for some people, and
yeah,
like deep dogma. And I'm always just like, what is my crypto thesis, and reviewing it periodically. And when something like Celsius collapses, it's like, okay, how does this impact my thesis of what I really believe in here? And I'm curious, like when you look at even Bitcoin, are there are there um, are there risks that you see,
hmm,
regulatory or just when you have something as potent as this idea of
yeah,
decentralization, obviously people are going to mess with it. They're going to try and undermine it. They're going to try and own it. One of the best ways to control something is to own it. I think
yeah,
that's what's really happened here.
yep.
So, like, when and where does your, um, yeah, when does the virtue and vision of a project run aground, or does it, with regards to even the layer ones?
Yeah, yeah, great question. So let's see. I mean, where to even start with that? So I think kind of, and this is also kind of a tough thing for me, and I think anybody who, in fact, I think you and I have talked about the same thing about, like, most of us who are interested in more than money. who see the potential good that this can do for the world, for human rights, for as a counterbalance against big tech, governments, central bank debasement, all of this stuff. Um, the money is secondary and it's a byproduct. And yes, we're investing. Yes, we want like a return and to make good decisions there. But there are more important things to us. And so I think kind of acknowledging human beings run all these things, and everything to some degree, when it gets big enough, when it gets powerful enough, seems to get corrupted.
Hmm.
And that in some way could almost be like a natural mechanism in life to ensure its ultimate downfall, demise, and something new being created, right? And so I don't think it has to be necessarily viewed from a cynical lens, but to realize that crypto is closer to the virtuous side right now. It's kind of maybe getting towards the middle where it's kind of getting a little bit more corrupted, and ultimately most of this is probably going to end up a few steps better than big tech today. But probably, when a significant number of a huge amount of crypto is run on AWS, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
decentralized throughout different AWS regions, right? So so anyway, but also realizing that as frustrating as that can be, that is also okay, and that not necessarily like a moral sense, but in the sense of that is just kind of how life works. And I think kind of a good example of this, I think you and I actually talked about this last time, of, I the internet is the closest comparison to me for Web3. And I have watched the internet through my whole life go from this kind of utopian wild west to this kind of utopian thing to this kind of um, early very innovative thing to now this kind of mid later stage, depending on how you want to look at it, um, thing that is dominated by five big tech companies and three cloud providers,
Mhm.
and all of this just absurd centralization. They have more power than any entity has ever had in a lot of different ways, and yet the internet has still done more to expand human rights and our connectivity with each other and all of these things than any other technology, any other humanitarian project, period, ever. Right? It has connected us in ways to where someone who is oppressed in a developing nation and experiences or sees something horrible can film it, can put it online, and can get national, like international attention on this little town, on this whatever it is. Things like that are just absolutely just incredible. And so I think the same thing when it comes to Web3 and crypto stuff, to where it's, um, we'll use Solana as an example, right? A lot of crypto has very, very, very mixed feelings on Solana, and I share a lot of those mixed feelings. Um, it's controlled largely by VCs. Every time they're like, "Oh, we need to have this, decentralization coefficient," and then they'll just magically, have nodes spring up to where now they meet this new criteria of decentralization, whatever it is. Say, the more utopian projects, the Cardanos and Polkadots, say they don't make it, and everything ends up running on Solana because they do a better job attracting new users than just about anybody. Is that still a step forward from a just a human experience, human rights standpoint? It's an open network. Anyone in the entire world can use it. You can use it to store value, to transfer value. Transactions are almost
Mhm.
free. Blah blah blah. Like, okay, so it ends up being controlled and enriching this group of people more than others, and that's the worst case. A more worst case scenario. Okay, that's still a win. That's still a positive.
Mhm.
And so I try to kind of take, I guess, a little bit more of a step back, because the reality is, um, people don't care about decentralization, and they don't care. They really don't,
Mhm.
and they don't care about privacy. And we've seen that with big tech. If people did, Facebook wouldn't be one of the biggest, one of the most
Mhm.
lucrative businesses in the world. Um, and so I think that same thing in crypto, of the ones that are so hardline on certain principles, uh, are not going to attract the most users, because they're so hardline that they're going to get lapped by these
Mhm.
um, projects that will invest more in making the user experience better, or invest more in onboarding and attracting new users and things like that. So anyway, um, big topic, and it's something that I kind of
Mm,
morally struggle with too at different times. But I think also it's kind of it's important to also look at the state that we're coming from, right? And we're coming from a world that is so hyper permissioned, to where if you are not only not in the U.S., but if you are not don't have certain kinds of documentation in the U.S., or if you're not from, even in some places, certain background, the level of discrimination even in the U.S. is nuts. You can be denied a bank account. You can have your funds taken away. You can have like you can just things that are just so like just inhuman
mm,
to treat different groups of people this way. When we're talking about, okay, if you can't access funds in your bank account, or we don't let you get it, have access to a bank, you don't have a way to store your funds, and you're now a target to be robbed. Or if you can't get access to your money, you can't afford rent or food for your children. Like these are, and especially when you get into kind of developing nations and stuff like that, like this is not like, it's crypto's right now largely about, gambling in rich countries and
mm,
survival in poor countries.
mm,
And I think that perspective is something that's very quickly forgotten when it's about the 10x, the 1000x, the whatever it is. But for I you know billions of people in this world, the majority of this world lives in absolutely, unbelievable conditions. Um, and being able to have these open networks, even if they are not perfect, even if they enrich a group of, um, you know, rich assholes more than everybody else by a crazy margin, technology pretty much always does that. And it's still the benefit that this has um, for just billions, literally billions of people around the world is just absolutely incredible to me.
mm,
So anyway, that's kind of the lens I try to kind of find a I don't know, try to find where my line is, where something is
mm.
more good than bad, But yeah,
Yeah, great answer. As you were sharing that, I'm always just kind of like readjusting and refocusing what I think and feel, and especially after just it's been a crazy experience, not only to be a personal investor in crypto, but then also to be someone that people have listened to about these
mhm,
things. That really, I mean, it's just my my thoughts, my feelings. I try to be very honest about that fact that I'm not like
yeah,
an oracle or
yeah,
super experienced here. You have far more investment experience than I do. I just feel like when I look at it from a zoomed out lens, and I keep reevaluating this, like, what is crypto? Where does it fit in? The things that I keep coming back to are, it's very profitable. Like, I
hmm,
don't think it's going away, simply for the fact that those who understand it and already have huge monetary, um, you know, investments to make are going to continue to come here because it's a wild west. It's unregulated. It's, they're making crazy returns. So just because of that, I think crypto has more shelf life. It starts to run into the even bigger power structures, governments, world banks, people who don't want those developing nations to have the kinds of freedom and access that we're
that's true.
talking about right now.
That is true.
And I see eventually this confluence of the technology, which is which is just obvious. Like,
Yeah,
digitizing has sped up everything. We've digitized voice and sound and everything. It's only logical that we would eventually digitize our value, and we're
yeah,
not passing around pieces of paper, but we've got some sort of a ledger, whether it's decentralized or centralized. Like, the mechanics of it are obvious. I see those bigger powers right now, um, executing some plan that we don't fully grok yet, but probably will more and more. And you get
hmm,
little inklings of it, just as time goes on. But I think that these same tools that were originally brought out of this desire to level the playing field, could eventually become the exact reason why, even if you're a billionaire, it's all going to be in Uncle Sam fund
hmm,
credits, and at any point those can just be deleted, removed, passed to someone else. And so I guess that's where, like, just the sober humanist who loves humans but also just kind of sees the patterns that play out throughout history, I believe in an investment in even layer ones and some of these ancillary projects that have brand recognition, good founders out doing the PR, because that is profitable. I'm I just can't get back on that train of this is going to radically improve the lives and livelihoods of a global population, because I really feel like the tools are being um, those ideas are being used in the service of a different vision of the future, where we are not likely to benefit in those ways that we once dreamed. And I know that seems really fatalistic and bad, but it's just like that's where that's the length you talked about, a time horizon. That's as far as my
Hmm.
crypto thesis goes, and I'm not allowing myself to see this grand, beautiful, orange-colored vision of Bitcoin City where we all are sharing the
I
same
agree with you on that.
currency and we're all, the
Yeah, it's no, no, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go
no, no,
ahead, go
no. I
ahead.
mean, I think it's a hard place to be because I want to have that level of engagement and belief in this because it could be that. I'm just also mindful of those interests that are much bigger
Hmm.
that probably don't want that and are probably, as we speak, talking about how are we gonna deal with this challenge. And they've got more time, more resources, more uh, yeah, just understanding, and that's probably what will kind of reshape the next version of what humankind is on the planet in this hyper yeah, connected way.
So I agree with so much of what you just said. So I also kind of mentioned like it took me several years to actually kind of going through that, I don't know, trough of disillusionment of like getting getting into crypto. I got into crypto early 2017, rode through the highs and all this craziness, and crypto's going to change the world tomorrow and blah blah blah, and then going through the worst bear market I have ever been in my entire life, period, of like 2018, 2019. Where, I mean, if you mentioned crypto, it was like you were like a pariah. It was like, oh,
Yeah.
that's like, like it was like, and wondering like, my best friend and I were in the same boat of like wondering like if we were just nuts or if this was just like we were just wrong or 10 years too early or whatever it was. So anyway, so I will kind of mention, especially for anybody listening who's like maybe going through the phase of being hyper resentful for being 80 or 90% down in their portfolio for believing in this, again, like I think that's almost like a rite of passage for everybody. In fact, I even kind of like tell people like, and I said the same thing during the highs where it was like, oh, I want to get in, blah blah blah. You've done well, you made money, and I was like, I spent 4 years being down like 80%, man. Like if you're not willing to endure from once, if you get in the middle of a cycle, you need to be thinking about the next cycle. The next cycle is when you make your money and everything. So um, anyway, just kind of little side note. But then kind of I guess a couple things on the kind of whole improving the world thing. So I agree with you that if they're able to stop it, the sort of powers that be that don't want these things to exist. And for anybody who thinks that that's just kind of like an abstract conspiracy, like Confessions of an Economic Hitman, amazing book. And there's some interviews with him as well. The guy who wrote that book, used to work kind of tangentially to like the IMF. He got poisoned and almost assassinated for writing that book. So anyway, these are, what you're talking about is very, very real in terms of wanting to keep certain things away from developing nations to keep them dependent on the fiat rails that the U.S. and Europe and largely the U.S. Controls. But the power of crypto in the decentralization piece for the projects that actually are decentralized. So Bitcoin, there's some censorship risks now with Ethereum being proof of stake. We'll see how that shakes out. Cardano has done probably a better job decentralizing than anybody, and same thing with and Polkadot as well. The founders of, and I'll just take Cardano and Polkadot because they both have just incredible founders that really care about these things. They went decentralization first, in the sense of we know that this is going to be, if this is successful, it's going to be so powerful that it is going to be a huge threat to the
Mm.
existing financial infrastructure. That if someone can control this thing outright through regulation, if one country can control this, they will, and they will try to regulate it out of existence. They will, whatever. They would have done that with Bitcoin if they could have controlled it. China and the CCP have tried numerous times to get rid of Bitcoin. And China does a better job of editing the internet and so than I thought any entity like ever possibly could be. And they haven't been able to do it. And that to me is an absurd level of power. So just take the most basic use case of Bitcoin itself, and for say a refugee that needs to be able to take whatever amount of value they have saved and needs to be able to cross a border, or needs to be able to move to a different place, or whatever it is, being able to have that globally accessible bank account where your seed phrase, your bank account information can be stored on a piece of paper, or you can just memorize it. It's 12 or 24 words. And just that most basic of use case that was, developed in 2009 with Bitcoin is absolutely life changing for a massive number of people throughout the world. And when you have, and we're in this kind of, as we're in this late stage fiat currency world where every fiat currency historically ultimately fails, right? And the U.S. is the least bad. The U.S. dollar is the least bad of the of the fiat currencies right now, right? Um, every other, you think about, even with how bad it is for people in Europe with devaluation right now, when the euro is one of the largest currencies in the world. Think about what it is for people in South America, for people in Africa, for people in all these other places, where their currencies, there's a history of it, and it happens so often that um, that
Mm.
it's, the currency devaluations, like with major currencies, usually happen less frequently with big reserve currencies. So like in the U.S., people aren't used to that. Well, again, in South America and in Africa and in Zimbabwe, like this has happened so frequently
Mm.
that people have lived through it, several different times. Being able to access a global network that is outside of that, and being able to basically, that has the potential to not only let someone take their assets with them, but to not be robbed on the way, to be able to actually escape with their family, to be able to make payments throughout that journey. And that to me is still just that's still just having to do with money.
Mm.
And crypto being money is the most boring use case for crypto, period. Like I had that conversation so many times last year, of like trying to break people away from the thought of like, oh, crypto is Bitcoin, crypto is money. No, like Bitcoin is a money email, right? Like
Mm.
Bitcoin is to Web3 what email was to the internet. It's
Mm.
important, it's very important, but it was the first use case, and there is a whole world of other things on top of that. If major governments come out and they say, you know what, you're not allowed to use, like Turkey did this, where it's like you're not allowed to use crypto for payments, or anything like that. Like that changes my thesis none, like
Mm.
nothing at all. I don't buy stuff with crypto. Like I'm not gonna, like, whether somebody could go to Starbucks and like buy with Bitcoin. Like who cares? This is Bitcoin is aiming to be this international network that is digital gold outside of the legacy system, fixed supply,
Mm.
blah blah blah. But say somebody doesn't even buy into that at all, and they're like, hey, you have to believe in Bitcoin for it to be valuable. The reason why Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger hate Bitcoin, they can't get past Bitcoin to see anything else. That's perfectly fine. You can hate Bitcoin and think it's ridiculous, and think that it's fool's gold and whatever. That's perfectly fine. Why don't we talk about the rest of Web3? Why don't we talk about Ethereum? Why don't we talk about Cardano? Why don't we talk about things where you can run financial infrastructure, where you can have decentralized identity, where you could have a global ID card that says this is who I am, or even where there's no regulatory framework around it, but to where that can be your access point for everything. That same power of, um, I have my digital wallet, again, being able to have my digital
Mm.
ID, and like the work that Cardano and the Prism, what is it? I forget the first part, but anyway, it's their Prism product that they've worked on in Africa
Mm.
is largely for that exact use case of how do I have an actual digital identity, and for, again, millions and millions of people that are largely undocumented, et cetera, et cetera. And then when you go from there into, okay, now I have kind of digital identity, maybe I have a forward-thinking government in a developing nation that acknowledges there have been coups here, there have been issues, people don't trust the government, they don't trust property records, there have been seizures, things like that. We're going to use a public blockchain that people do trust, whether that's, it'd be kind of hard to use Bitcoin, but like, say that's Cardano, say that's something that is trusted globally. And you could have nations run their property records on on public blockchains. You could have them run voting systems, and you could have it to where it's an acknowledgement of, hey, no. And this is a big problem we have globally, we have in the US too. Nobody trusts anybody. Half the people in this country think that the last election was rigged, and the other half think that the election before that was rigged. Like, it's nobody trusts anything. um, Being able to have things on and a large part of that is because it's not transparent. It's not done in a transparent way. It's done we have all these trusted intermediaries. And when society divides, nobody trusts anybody. And um, and so anyway, being able to have these public blockchains to restore that trust element has, to me, almost limitless use cases in terms of massive amounts of good, of not only good in kind of an abstract sense or a small sense for the individual, but if you look at kind of a farther out time frame, maybe 10 years, 20 years, however long things take to really be, trusted and adopted. We're 30 years into the internet now, or the public internet. This is potentially a way to get us to all stop killing each other, and to get us to all like, imagine a world where we can all agree on the same facts. Like, you know what I mean? Where, like, that's a beautiful place. That's a beautiful world to say, oh, what really happened to this money? You don't have to trust me. It's a public ledger. It's a
Mm.
right. That gets rid of so much conflict and creates so many fewer avenues for the basically the different media machines to manipulate people, and the different political machines. And I know you've started talking more about kind of the political pieces of a big part of the reason why it's so easy for one side or the other to weaponize, to just spin up a mob, like
Mm.
overnight, is because we're not going off of facts. We're going off of somebody's spinning of
Mm.
something that may or may not have happened. You know what I mean? And the amount of conspiracies and just crazy, it's absolutely nuts, because we're just living in this kind of, you know world where we can't all agree on the truth of anything,
Mm.
because everything on the internet can be faked. And so anyway, kind of long answer, but to me, it's also, there's the short term piece and medium term piece, and then there's the long term piece of,
Mm.
um, we're all gonna kill each other if we don't change something. You know what I mean? Like, literally, we have nuclear weapons, and we have leaders acting like children, and we have these divisions within countries that have nuclear weapons that are electing people that should not be in charge of a should not be in charge of a Starbucks, let alone like running a country. And if people are if there is the reestablishment of
Mm.
truth into that dynamic, that radically changes the kind of people that get elected.
Yeah. That was one of the best just outflowings of, yeah, like
You're too kind.
yeah, like a future worth getting excited for. And I appreciate in talking to you, like I always love getting reflected back, and I really try to like see these things, understand these things, like, and I try to talk about it in one of my more recent videos, which I don't think was very good, but that's also because it was coming from this point of like, I understand my biases right now as being affected by maybe believing in some of these things too strongly and having that affect some other decisions that probably should have been detached. Like, to be a good investor, I think requires, you know, what you just said is very exciting, but you also don't want to bet,
Yeah,
on the entire space with that same level of
it's not
enthusiasm.
happening for a while. Yeah.
Yeah, and so like I just what you just said there was really kind of a cool moment for me, because I felt the stirrings of some of the things that initially got me very interested in this space, because a lot of what I've done in other projects have been focused on these same challenges just in different ways. And it was
Yeah.
exactly that potential of crypto to provide that immutable, um, common set of uh, pieces that could be put together to solve challenges in better ways that got me really excited initially. And so, I think we're getting close to time here. So what I want to do is I want to kind of recap for me what I've heard from you that really stands out, and then I'll just give you the last words to kind of conclude it. But I think, first and foremost, you do a very good job of communicating a lot of information that is complex in a clear way. So I think calling it clarity in crypto
Thank you.
is a good name for what you're about. Um, I think that I've really enjoyed speaking with you about, yeah, those cycles, how those play into the short term money making by those that understand how fear, greed, psychology,
Yeah.
gambling, addiction, dopamine, all of this stuff creates kind of a perfect storm
Yeah.
that if you're caught wrong-footed, or you're just, you don't have a good grounding initially when you come into crypto, you're easy prey. And a
Yep.
lot of people are really jaded in this space because they were
Yeah.
prey. And once you've been preyed
Hmm.
upon, like, you got trust
Yep.
issues, you've got all these other things.
Yep.
I've enjoyed talking about what we were just speaking about, kind of the bigger human perspective of where we're at in history, which is a very interesting spot. I mean, history, it's always been interesting. Any decade you want to throw a dart at on the calendar, is going to have a lot of these same feelings of gravity and importance, but this just happens to be our living of it. And crypto does tie into this in that, um, where we are seeing failure of the old institutions and systems and centralized entities, this space does offer a potential alternative. Uh,
Yeah.
and a lot of the people that have come to it are very virtuous or just human hearted. There's a lot of
Yeah.
crypto founders that I think are, doing this for the
Yep.
right reasons, and there's a lot that aren't.
Hmm.
So, it's been fun to kind of steep back in that space and just get excited about a few things again. I I think my thesis still remains that, I see what this is. I want to benefit more in one direction than the other next time. So I think I'm operating
Yeah.
from a little bit more of a solid foundation, but I'm still on the fence to like become an evangelist again until these visions have threaded into the reality happening a little bit more clearly. Because, like you said, that .com bubble is a great analogy. The potential is there, the
Hmm.
words are there, but where the rubber meets the road, at least in my daily experience, hasn't happened yet. And
Yep.
um, as that continues to evolve, and as I am using a digital ID card and it's powered by Cardano, or I'm, saving for my kids' college in a very intelligent way, and it's powered by some other thing other than, my bank that's offering 0.01% interest on a savings account or whatever. Like,
Hmm.
as these things become more meaningful and used and integrated on these networks, I think that's when there'll be kind of that softening of, yeah, my reluctance to think that this is what it is at face value, even though the hope is there. The reality is still yet to play out, and there's a lot of influences that could shake
Hmm.
that foundation. So, yeah. Any last words, or remind people how to find you and your YouTube channel and Twitter, all that good stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I first off, I completely, I guess even before kind of mentioning that stuff, I'll just kind of mention like to validate your position. I think that there are a ton of people who feel like that,
Mhm.
and I felt like that after I felt like that for several years, and I think that there's, that's also kind of one of the hallmarks of people that are really passionate and really committed, like that it gets easier over time because it's like what I mean. So anyway, I completely, yeah, just want to kind of validate that that feeling. But then anyway, but in terms of clarity stuff, you can go to clarityincrypto.com. that will probably link you to just about everything. It's also Clarity in Crypto on Twitter, the Clarity in Crypto YouTube page. There's also a newsletter you can get linked to on main site. And then just, I guess, a couple, I guess, parting thoughts for, again, for the people who got involved this last cycle, and have been burned to various degrees, and are very rightfully angry. Um, I would basically say that the best revenge is success,
Hmm.
and and to basically learn how this system works, how, if you got screwed on something, understand the mechanism of how that happened, because it's probably either something about the hype machine, or market maker, or some kind of market manipulation, or some kind of flashy marketing, something like that. And then kind of bringing it back to the fundamentals of, acknowledging you're never going to time it right, and everyone has that story from when they first got into crypto. um, and then basically that bear markets are the best possible time to get involved, to learn. They really are, because the hype's gone, and you can actually, it's so much easier to discern who really has staying power. And so I would just encourage anyone listening to don't see this as necessarily like a bad time in the market. It's just a time in the market. Winter is not bad. There's plenty of,
Hmm.
it's a lot of valuable things that come from winter. And then let me think. I felt like there was something else I wanted to share, but yeah, I think that's probably most everything. Oh, I guess the only other thing I'll mention, the next cycle will arrive. This is, at least speaking for myself, and having been, in the technology world for a very long time, since I was, investor since I was like 13. This wave of everything behind crypto is the biggest thing I have seen in my entire life, bar none. Not by a factor of 5 or 10, but by a factor of like 100, of these exponentially increasing things, and then a new thing will be invented, and that will exponentially increase. And I think that anyone who is awake to that and sees that deserves the right to benefit from that in some way. And that's again the uh, big part of the ethos behind clarity is an honest, non bullshit way to understand what's going on in crypto. So anyway, um, yeah, I think that's all I got. And thanks again for having me on. And I always really enjoy talking to you.
Yeah, likewise. Cool. Well, yeah, that was one of the best conversations I've had about crypto in a while, and I'm
Oh,
excited to
thanks,
share it.
man.
And yeah, Graham, I'll let you get back to your day. Uh,
Well,
cheers, man.
same to you, man. All right, take care.
Bye.
Enjoy your afternoon.